guys ready to
point
start
where
the show?
mixtapes technically, if you're not familiar, they're not legal. So it's like one of those gray areas in the industry where artists put out records. It's how, like, especially in the hip hop side, that's where people break. It's, how a lot of artists used to tour and do that. In hip hop, you put out a mixtape, which is you rapping over other people's beats and stuff. And it's acceptable. It's not like you're bootlegging it, but it's still totally not legal. So I put up this site. All of a sudden in my email inbox, I got a letter from, I won't say his name, but I still remember the name very clearly, of a lawyer from the RIAA saying that, and it was, and by the way, the site was in my dad's name because I wasn't old enough. I didn't have a credit card. So it was addressed to him. So it was like, you're being like sued and all this crazy stuff for copyright and fraud, or like, all the crazy, like how the RIAA is. So I'm like, damn, this is real. And I just delete it because I'm like, I'm not going to tell my dad or anything. So a couple days later, not maybe a week later, my dad picks me up. I've never seen him so scared in his life. Like, he's like, he got the same letter. They actually mailed it too, because they had, people actually still used mail, I guess, back then. And they had the address when you registered the website. So he was being sued and all this. So I told him what I was doing. I was like, no, it's nothing. So he ends up he gets a lawyer, and they talk to him, and they say, look, we're just going to say this was a school project. You're going to promise to never DJ again and never do any of that. So I finally end up, weasel my way out of it. I write him a letter saying, hey, I was just a 16-year-old. I didn't know it was wrong. It was a high school project. They're like, all right, we'll let you go. We'll be watching. You can never do anything like this again. So of course, I ended up making a career of it, but long story short, so through doing all that, I got connected with the guy who was the CEO of Loud Records and Sony at the time, Steve Rifkin, and I ended up sending him like a proposal on what I thought he was doing wrong with his label at the time, just because I wanted to get like some free t-shirts, like a Wu-Tang Clan t-shirt to me would have been the coolest thing in the history of the world. So I sent him this letter, and that's all I expected, and he loves it so much. He's crazy. Steve's my guy, but he ends up saying, hey, come work for me. So I'm like, cool. So I'm like 16, 17, figure out a way to like scheme and graduate high school early. I'm the first person ever, I think, in the state, like when online school first started. Now it's common. I like find the way, and the principal's like, you can't do this. So I go to like the school board and figure these ways to take like all these online classes so I can get my credits and eventually move to LA after all this. So it's a bunch of meetings between myself and Steve. He flies me out to New York, never shows up because he has another meeting, cancels on me. So I'd literally like take the day off of school, fly out to New York in the morning to try to take this meeting, come back. It goes on a few times, and I finally connect with him. He offers me a job. I come to LA, I'd never been out here really in my life before, and end up working for him. So I remember I started right after, I think it was after tax day. So the first day I walk into the office, I still don't know what I'm doing. He just tells me he really wants me to come work for him. And I'm so excited. I come to LA, I moved out here. I left high school early. All my other friends are seniors in high school. I'm working at like the coolest record label, and it's a competitive industry. Like everybody wants to work here and stuff. So I walk in the first day, and everybody's already looking at me crazy because they're like, who is this like young kid? Like, what the hell is he doing from Minnesota? All my boys, like, we've all been working here for a while. We've put in work. We've done this. What does he do? And like, I have no idea. Like, so I already kind of get these weird looks. The first day, so Steve walks me in. I wait outside of his office for like an hour for him to finally come in. He gets there, and he sits me in a room and is like, all right, cool. You ready? Like, yeah. He's like, all right, you good? I'm like, yeah, of course. He's like, all right, cool. Leaves me. So no job description, nothing. I didn't have a title or anything else like that. So I sit there and I just go on the computer and start like writing up ideas and all that. So that's kind of the first half of my morning, just figuring out what's going on, meeting people and all that. So first day at work, and it gets better. That's just the start. So, I'm just having a regular day. It's fun. So then he calls a company staff-wide meeting. So I'm like, yes, cool. Now this is where it's really going to go down. So he introduces me, and then at the time I didn't realize that Loud was going under. Their deal with Sony expired. So he basically had a meeting and laid off the entire staff, which was weird. I'm like, is this normal? Oh, okay, this is, like, I'd never worked a real job, let alone like a real industry one. So he basically was like, yeah, we're gonna go through these things, like our deal with Sony's all over, they're buying it up, but we're gonna be all right, it's just gonna take a while, but you guys might need to go do some things. So he lays everybody off. Meanwhile, I'm there, and I'm still like, because he had his other side, like individual company, and luckily I wasn't getting paid anything, so he could probably afford to keep me on. Looking back on it, this is the only reason, but all these other people are like, who is this kid? And it ends up being crazy. So he ends up like, a couple days later, they're making business cards. So they come to me and like, oh, you make your cards. What do you want? What's your title? I'm like, I don't know. They're like, what do you want it to be? I'm like, what's your like marketing executive? I'm like, all right, cool. So I make my own card. So it's just the craziest thing ever. So I basically have, I'm thrown in trial by fire. Everybody gets laid off. I don't have a title. I just kind of, Steve was so crazy, and that's my guy, and he taught me, and put me here, and if it wasn't for him, but just my first gig, I just remember not knowing anything still to this day of what I did right away. I mean, I kind of worked my way in, and eventually, he had a marketing company, so I brought in some clients and started working with them, and we eventually did a new deal with Universal Records. So was there at the beginning of that, but it was just really, really interesting. I mean, I don't think anybody's had a situation quite like that I've heard.